Germany, 1933. Adolf Hitler was elected Chancellor of the German Parliament. Subsequently, his supporters set fire to the building the government was seated in, which enabled Hitler to obtain emergency powers. A month later, he created the first 4 concentration camps, and his reign of terror began. A law was passed that stripped Jewish immigrants from Poland of their German citizenship. Shops were boycotted, and Jews were no longer allowed to own land. In August 1934, the German president died, allowing Hitler to become Germany's absolute leader. His goal was nothing less than to control all of Europe.
After the invasion by Nazis in Poland during September 1939, it was instinctual for most citizens to flee from the terror the soldiers wrought. Unfortunately, some were not given the chance to run. Others took it upon themselves to explore and encounter ways to survive and fight back against the Nazis.
Could a band of Jewish brothers escape detention and hide from the threat posed by the Nazi army? The Bielski brothers accomplished such a feat through exploring unorthodox methods to resist oppression and by embarking on a journey where they relied on their Jewish ideals while encountering and exchanging with like minds to persevere through overwhelming odds.
The Bielski brothers enacted a very successful resistance group against the Nazis in the forest of Belarus and saved over 1,200 Jews during the Holocaust. The Partisans explored the unknown when they fled into the forest and resisted against the Nazis by performing small and calculated acts of defiance. Despite the many dangers and difficulties the group encountered, they persevered and succeeded in making one of the most successful Holocaust resistance groups.
Tuvia Bielski was born in May of 1906 in Nowogródok, Poland. He grew up within the only Jewish family in a small Polish village. During World War I, he served as a language interpreter for the Imperial German Army, but in 1927 he was recruited to the Polish Army. After Tuvia returned home, he married a woman named Rivka for her money, not for love. When Poland was invaded by Nazis in 1939, the Bielskis fled to their parents' summer home. During early 1941, the Jews in Poland were deported to ghettos, but Tuvia and 3 of his brothers managed to flee to the forest of Belarus. Unfortunately, the rest of their family was killed in a ghetto.
It's a tragedy what's happening. I personally think that I think it's important that everybody gets help. I think he would have the same kind of feeling on it as well.
Tuvia Bielski was forced to explore the forest of Belarus when he and his brothers fled from their parents' summer home. The forest is extraordinarily dense, and it took them a while to familiarize themselves with their surroundings. Fortunately, the Nazi soldiers were not as accustomed to the forest as the Partisans. As a result, the Bielski Brigade never surrendered to the Nazis.
The Bielski Partisans explored ways to make their various camps feel like home. When Tuvia and his brothers fled, their primary focus was surviving, and their camps consisted of a few dugouts to sleep in and an eating area. As the amount of partisans climbed, more structures were added to accommodate everyone's needs.
Throughout the Holocaust, the Bielski Brigade had to explore the courage within themselves in order to defy and resist the occupying force. The Bielskis also explored different techniques of defiance before they decided which methods did the most damage without endangering the resistors. The Partisans used stolen bombs to destroy train tracks and bridges. Sometimes Tuvia shot at Nazis while the soldiers were passing by. Perhaps the greatest form of defiance, apart from surviving and practicing religion, was when the brigade broke over 100 people out of a ghetto.
Many different forms of resistance. There was resistance that you could fight. There was resistance that you could practice religion. There was a resistance that you could live. So there's different.
After the Bielskis grew acquainted with the forest, they explored the different methods of practicing religion with limited resources. When the Jewish partisans were not in hiding, they commemorated Shabbat every Friday evening, observed holidays, and, at times, celebrated traditional Jewish weddings and held a coming-of-age ceremony called the Bar Mitzvah when a boy turned 13. Unfortunately, the Bielskis were not able to celebrate all of the special days, but once they settled down into a camp, they built a synagogue. While the brigade was forced to practice religion in an unusual way, they made do and succeeded in remembering Judaism.
The Bielski Brigade encountered struggle and danger amongst other things while in hiding. The difficulties they faced included staying warm and getting enough food. In the coldest winters, partisans resorted to using others' body heat to avoid hypothermia. When food was scarce, the brigade's leaders killed the horses to eat. Due to the lack of food, theft of someone else's meal was not tolerated.
Being there, having somebody, get shot dead right next to you, or, seeing these unspeakable things of babies being, thrown into fires and, alive, and things like that happened all the time.
Some of the danger Tuvia encountered was due to lack of relations with farmers who were victim to the brigade's defiance. Although many local Samaritans were sympathetic to the Bielski's cause and donated food, weapons, and other necessities, the brigade was forced to steal from people who were not willing to help them, simply because the brigade needed to survive. Nonetheless, civilians who helped the partisans were put at risk. If the Nazis discovered civilian support, soldiers would attempt to obtain secret intelligence regarding the Bielskis and then punish anyone involved.
They wouldn't go in and take everything. They would go in and take some supplies and come back at another time and take more supplies. But they didn't like it, but they didn't have a choice.
Additional danger ensued from the threat of Nazis. There was a bounty set for Tuvia, dead or alive, and he had to work extraordinarily hard to avoid capture. Although Tuvia had to worry about his safety more than the other partisans, he ensured they all knew what to do should the Nazis find their camp. To prevent the situation from occurring, the camp was constantly nomadic and the brigade was able to avoid capture.
The Bielski partisans were forced to exchange ideas regarding survival and the utilization of one's talents to avoid being captured by Nazis. All of the members of the brigade came from different backgrounds, and each of them had different proposals regarding survival, such as using camouflage and finding a well-placed vantage point. Tuvia learned from the brigade members that it was important they could leave their community at a moment's notice, so he ensured that there was a clear and well-known path to safety.
It took a while to establish a functioning community, and it was done through the exchange of innovative ideas. When new people entered the camp, they registered by telling Tuvia what valuable items they had, if any, and what skills and talents they possessed. Each new member found their niche within the camp when they started to work. Tuvia employed every member of the brigade that was able to work. Women mended clothes, cooked food, and tended to the elderly, whereas men hunted, built shelters and other structures, and ambushed the Nazis when given the opportunity.
The Bielski brigade had to steal weapons if they wanted to use them. After ambushing Nazis, Tuvia would take the soldiers' weapons for future use. The partisans also obtained weapons through their two dealers, who were both women. At the camp, men and women alike would practice shooting and aiming guns. Those who had learned how to fight well and how to protect themselves were sent on crusades for supplies and Nazi ambushes with Tuvia.
In June 1944, the Soviet Army liberated all of Belarusia, present-day Belarus. At the time of their liberation, the Bielski Brigade had reached a peak of over 1,200 people. More than 70% of the brigade consisted of women, the elderly, and children.
They had no money, they had no clothing, they had nothing. Everything was taken away from them. So even though they were liberated, all of a sudden they're like, what are we supposed to do now? At least when they were running from them and surviving, they had a purpose. The purpose was to live.
After World War II officially ended, Tuvia and his family immigrated to Palestine. He fought in the Israel Armed Forces during the war in 1948 that established the Israeli state. The members of the brigade found solace by migrating back to their native communities or immigrating to the United States and other countries as a result of World War II.
After fighting in the war that gave Israel its independence from the Arab states, Tuvia Bielski moved to New York, where he built a career in the trucking and transportation industry. Tuvia was happy to share his story with anyone who wanted to listen, but the rest of the partisans remained quiet for many decades about their experiences in the brigade, till recent years when they began sharing these stories of resilience and courage with their descendants.
It just wasn't, just the group that he saved, but now you think about all the descendants from those people.
Yeah.
So there's hundreds and thousands of people all over the world that are, alive because of what he did.
This extraordinary story of how a small band of resistors fought against a dictatorship demonstrates what people can accomplish even against overwhelming odds if they work together. The partisans were able to survive by exploring the concept of resistance in the forests of Belarus, encountering struggle and danger but handling it appropriately, and exchanging ideas regarding survival and resistance. The Bielski brothers founded an incredible resistance against the Nazis, and tens of thousands of people are alive today because of their courageous actions.